The sound of crying echoed through the hospital corridor before anyone even saw what had happened. It wasn't the cry of a newborn or the pain of a wound, it was raw, broken, desperate. A heavily pregnant woman, clutching her stomach and gasping for air, staggered backward as another woman in a royal blue dress yanked her hair with a furious scream. Nurses froze in shock, patients turned their heads from wheelchairs and hospital beds, and even the steady beep of monitors seemed to falter for a second. In that sterile hallway, time stood still. The woman in the hospital gown, her face pale and drenched in tears, was not just any patient. She was about to give birth. And the one attacking her wasn't a stranger. She was the mistress of her husband, a woman consumed by jealousy, driven to the edge of cruelty by a love she could never truly claim. Before we go deeper into this emotional true life story, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes. Your support helps us share more powerful stories that remind the world that even the softest hearts can carry the strongest strength. Her name was Sienna Hull, a 28-year-old woman who had once dreamed of nothing more than a peaceful life filled with laughter, family dinners, and gentle mornings. She was quiet, kind, and deeply forgiving, the kind of soul who believed that patience could mend anything. Her husband, Jordan, had once been her whole world. They met when life was simple, when he was still a humble, struggling architect and she was working as a small-town teacher. Together, they dreamed of building a life made of love, not luxury. But dreams are fragile things, and the higher you rise, the easier they are to shatter. As Jordan's success grew, so did his pride. He began chasing deals, late-night meetings, and admiration that glimmered under chandeliers instead of under the stars they once watched from their apartment balcony. The man who once held her hand through storms started slipping away, piece by piece. Sienna noticed the signs, the cold dinners, the distracted eyes, the perfume that wasn't hers on his shirt collar. She wanted to believe it was stress, exhaustion, or just business. But her heart already knew. When she discovered the truth, that Jordan was having an affair with a woman named Mara Steele, a powerful executive known for her beauty and ambition, her world crumbled silently. Mara was everything Sienna wasn't: elegant, bold, confident, the kind of woman whose presence demanded attention. When Sienna confronted her husband, he didn't deny it. His words cut deeper than betrayal. "Mara understands me better," he said flatly, his voice void of remorse. Then he walked out, leaving her standing in the doorway, trembling, holding her unborn child, and realizing that love wasn't enough for him anymore. The weeks that followed were a blur of loneliness and pain. Her pregnancy grew heavier, and so did her heart. She stopped eating much, stopped answering friends, and only spoke to the child inside her. "You'll never be alone," she whispered to her belly each night. "I'll keep you safe." But her body, weakened by stress and heartbreak, began to give way. When her doctor warned her of complications, Sienna quietly checked herself into a private hospital, hoping that a little rest would bring peace before the baby came. She didn't know that Mara had found out where she was. Jealousy has a way of turning even sorrow into cruelty. That afternoon, sunlight spilled across the hospital floor, bright and golden. Sienna sat on a bench by the window, one hand rubbing her aching belly, her other clutching a small notebook where she had written letters to her unborn child. The nurse had just left to fetch her medicine. The hallway was quiet, until sharp heels struck the tile like the march of war. Mara appeared at the end of the corridor, her blue dress glinting, her eyes blazing. Before anyone could react, she stormed toward Sienna. Words flew like knives, accusations, insults, all poisoned with hate. "You think that baby will keep him?" she screamed, her voice echoing down the sterile hall. Sienna barely had time to flinch before Mara's hand tangled in her hair, pulling so hard that she cried out in pain. The nurses rushed forward, shouting for security, but in that chaotic blur, Sienna's knees buckled. She clutched her belly, gasping as pain surged through her body. And then, just as the air thickened with panic, a deep, commanding voice cut through the noise. "Enough." Every head turned. A tall, silver-haired man in a dark overcoat stood at the entrance, his expression unreadable, his presence like thunder before a storm. His name was Arthur Vaughn, a man whose power and influence could silence entire boardrooms. The hospital staff froze, not from fear, but from recognition. Arthur Vaughn was one of the most powerful businessmen in the city. His word could change fates. But to Sienna, that name meant nothing. She didn't recognize him. Not yet. When Arthur's eyes met hers, something inside him broke. Those eyes, those gentle, tear-filled eyes, were the same as the woman he had once loved, decades ago. The same eyes of the daughter he had lost after a bitter divorce, the child he had spent years searching for, the one his ex-wife had told him never wanted him back. But here she was, pregnant, crying, attacked, abandoned, and he had found her not through power or wealth, but by accident, at the very moment she needed him most. Arthur stepped forward, his voice steady as he spoke to the nurses. "Get her away from my daughter." The hallway fell silent. Mara froze, disbelief flashing across her face. "Your daughter," she repeated, laughing bitterly. "This poor woman. You can't be serious." But when she turned and saw the hospital director bowing his head, the security guards stepping aside, and the whispers of, "That's Arthur Vaughn," ripple through the staff, the laughter vanished from her lips. Arthur's assistant stepped forward, phone in hand, already making calls. Within minutes, police arrived. Reporters began to gather outside, cameras flashing, chaos unfolding. Mara's reputation, so carefully built, crumbled before her eyes. She tried to protest, to scream that she didn't know who Sienna was, but it was too late. By the time she was led away in handcuffs, her world had already collapsed. Jordan arrived soon after, his face pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. He had heard the news and rushed over, only to find the hospital surrounded by cameras. He tried to explain, to plead, but Arthur didn't even look at him. Instead, he went straight to Sienna, who was trembling in pain, her contractions worsening. He reached for her hand gently. "You're safe now," he whispered. She looked up at him, confused, weak, but somehow comforted by the softness in his tone. Moments later, doctors rushed her to the delivery room. Arthur stayed outside, pacing, praying to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. He had spent his life building empires, winning wars in boardrooms, but none of it mattered as he stood there, terrified for the daughter he'd only just found. Hours passed. Rain began to fall outside, streaking the glass with silver tears. Finally, the door opened. The doctor smiled. "She's fine," he said. "And so is your grandson." Arthur's knees nearly gave way with relief. When he entered the room, Sienna was cradling a small bundle wrapped in white. The baby's tiny fingers gripped her thumb, and tears streamed down her cheeks, not from pain anymore, but from peace. Arthur stood by the door for a long time before he spoke. "Who are you?" she asked softly. He smiled sadly. "Someone who should have never left. Someone who's proud of you, Sienna." For a moment, confusion clouded her face, but then she looked into his eyes and saw the truth. The resemblance, the warmth, the love she had never known but had always longed for. And she cried, not because she was weak, but because she was finally safe. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The story spread across the city. Mara Steele, disgraced executive, arrested after assaulting Arthur Vaughn's pregnant daughter. Jordan's career disintegrated overnight. Every deal, every connection evaporated. But Sienna, she found something far more valuable than revenge. She found family. Arthur moved her into a beautiful countryside home surrounded by gardens, sunlight, and peace. He promised her he would never disappear again. He became a grandfather who held his grandson every morning and a father who made up for years of lost love with every gentle gesture. Sienna healed slowly, not with bitterness but with gratitude. Every night, when she looked at her baby sleeping beside her, she whispered the same words, "You are loved. You are safe. You will never know the pain I did." If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes. Your support helps us keep sharing powerful, emotional stories that remind the world that compassion and forgiveness still matter.